Oh. Well, it's now Sunday morning. I'm still wearing my Antigua and Barbuda Donkey Sanctuary yellow t-shirt. And like last Sunday, maybe we'll go to church, read a little bit of Joel Goldsmith today. This will not be a regular occurrence. Just so happens that I wanted to read Joel Goldsmith last Sunday, and I think I want to read some today for this car vid. This will not be ranty like the last couple videos. I don't even know if yesterday's video was ranty, but it was just kind of exploring the strangeness and the dogmatism of the LOA community. A book that, in a teaching approach that I usually don't talk about that much and is spoken about a lot. That's one reason I don't speak about it. And I'm not like that into it per se. Is Reality Transurfing. Vadim Zalen, I think I'm saying his name right. Vadim's, approach. His gigantic book, Reality Transurfing. It's a very, very good book. I actually don't know if I've ever read all of it. It's so darn big, but I think I've listened to most of it on audio and read, between reading and listening, I think I've read or listened to most of it. Anyway, it's a good book. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff out there about that approach. But one of the things that really stuck with me in that book that I really think actually is relevant to what we were discussing the last two car videos, specifically yesterday, about the lack of depth and I don't know, just like the dogmatism of the LOA and especially the law of assumption community, and how people say the same things and say this is how you do it, da-da-da. Anyway, in Reality Transurfing, Vadim says, he goes, what people forget, don't recognize is that life is about variability, and there's so many different ways to express essentially the same thing. And people fight because they think their way is the best way. And the reality is that there's all these different variable ways of explaining something. I really resonate with that, that sentiment. And, I was talking about my podcast yesterday. That's a lot of what the podcast is about. It's just different approaches, talking about essentially the same thing and different ways to describe these manifesting ideas and principles and the broader spiritual principles that you could say they fall under. And so, having said that, one approach for sure, one of my favorite approaches is what we often would call Emmett Fox calls it the golden key. I like the Joseph Murphy term, the absolute method. Also I always quote that H. Emily Cady, she calls it trustful passivity. Basically this idea of trusting in God and just focusing on God and letting everything else just take care of itself, basically. Let go and let God. And, perhaps no law of attraction type of teacher that I know of from recent times explains that approach more provocatively and interestingly and thoroughly as Joel Goldsmith. He really was all about basically this absolute method, contemplating God and not really, he said, that's what you do. You keep your eyes on God and everything takes care of itself. Everything shall be added unto you. And the problem is we focus on our human problems instead of focusing on God. And if we just focus on God, our human problems would naturally resolve themselves. That said, that's just an approach. There's variability here. We don't have to be religious like this, spiritual like this to appreciate these manifesting principles. We can look at it from a very psychological perspective, and just recognize the amount of self-suggestion we are under the influence of and how overwhelmingly powerful our imagination is, and not be thinking about God or any of these deep spiritual ideas at all, and still have these principles work effectively and positively in our life in a very, very powerful way, just as powerful a way you could say is this Goldsmith approach. It's interesting right now. I've been busy, and the two books I've kind of been toggling back and forth the last couple weeks, reading. I've been, I look at some other stuff, but the two books I've been like, I guess you could say studying or really contemplating, have been Invisible Supply by Joel Goldsmith, which I've been studying pretty consistently for the last year. I just think it's a great book. Invisible Supply, which is all about the absolute method, and then Suggestion and Autosuggestion by Charles Baudouin. We've made several videos. We've had several videos over the last month about that book and about what suggestibility is all about what Coué and some of these other great hypnotists and psychologists were talking about in the early part of the 20th century. And so it's been interesting for me just to toggle between the two, because Suggestion and Autosuggestion, that book by Baudouin, I know I've said this a couple times, I'm going to keep on saying it. It's a masterpiece. Again, shout out to Hugo for getting me back into looking at it again. It's a masterpiece, and it's like, I was talking yesterday about like an intelligent, like kind of like, sober-minded, somber, even discussion of like what suggestibility and what these imaginative principles, these law of attraction principles, like what they mean and how we can observe them in people's lives. That is what Suggestion and Autosuggestion, that book, is all about. It's a very sober-minded, intelligent, compassionate look at these ideas of suggestibility, and with no spiritual or religious overtones at all. It's like what Coué says. It's like, this is just how things work. This is how the mind works. So I've really been enjoying that book, looking at it again, and it's a really interesting thing to contrast with Invisible Supply by Joel Goldsmith, which is all about implementing these principles in a very spiritual, you could say religious way. So let's go to church for a couple minutes, huh? This is from Invisible Supply. Just to give you an idea of, like I say, I like calling it the absolute method. I just like that term. But this approach that Goldsmith's talking about, this very God-centered approach. And as soon as I read this, you're going to see, I've made a podcast episode about this before, or several. You're going to see why Goldsmith's not that popular, not nearly as popular as like someone like Neville. Goldsmith writes, "Let us give up all attempts to demonstrate employment, income, companionship, home, health, wealth, freedom, joy, peace of mind, even sinlessness. Let us give up even the desire to be good and pure. Cleanse the temple, clean the house of all the old desires, until our only desire is to realize God's presence, to realize omnipresence, to get acquainted with God and know Him all right." It's a very singular approach there, obviously. At the end of this chapter, he says something similar again. "Give up all desire for home, companionship, money, or supply in any form. Let your only desire be to realize God's presence, realize omnipresence, to realize I and the Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine. Having made that demonstration, is there any need to demonstrate anything else? The only demonstration to make is the realization of the truth. Keep your thoughts stayed on God. Learn to meditate. Be quiet. Be still. Let God touch you with His finger. Let God reveal Himself to you, and God revealing and manifesting Himself will appear in outer form as the things necessary to your daily living." So, again, very powerful, singular, spiritual approach that Joel Goldsmith is advocating. Just going to mention again, we're having a small group coaching session, private session, paid session, $50 on Wednesday, July 5th at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you want to join, it's going to be a small group. I think it's going to be a very good group session. You can email me at info@radicalcounselor.com. I hope that this video was helpful. And something else I want to mention is just if you have questions about this stuff, and you'd like me to make a video about it, about some of your questions, if the questions are, if the question resonates with me enough and it seems relevant enough, if you email me, there's a pretty good chance I'll make a video about it if it seems relevant. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you enjoy your Sunday, or enjoy whatever day it is that you are watching this video.